Hi everyone, if you don't know me already, my name is Matthew Fayisa and I'm a medical student from London. A lot of protests are going on in support of Black Lives Matter and the fight for equality. So I thought what the best way to kind of support this in the long term would be for me to make a video on sickle cell, a condition which mainly affects black individuals. To keep this concise, let's put a timer on the clock, get my stethoscope ready to be professional, and let's get underway. Sickle cell is a condition which affects the shape of red blood cells. Red blood cells contain a substance called hemoglobin, which binds the oxygen in the body that we breathe in, and then proceeds to exchange it with CO2, or carbon dioxide, which is the waste product formed from cells as a result of the process of respiration. Respiration is the vital mechanism of life, and without it we would die. Usually, in an individual who does not have sickle cell, the shape of the red blood cells are biconcave disc-like structures, giving them maximum surface area and maximum carrying capacity for oxygen. However, in individuals who do have sickle cell, these biconcave shaped discs then become crescent-shaped moons, or in like as it says in the name, sickle shapes, which not only reduces the surface area available for hemoglobin to be present, and therefore the amount of oxygen each red blood cell can carry, but also causes issues with transferring oxygen around the body. I say this because unaffected red blood cells, because of their biconcave disc shape, are designed to seamlessly pass through vessels efficiently and transport oxygen to their acquired target. However, the sickle cell shape can often cause blockages and clots as they get caught in vessels, and then lead to an accumulation of red blood cells stuck in one portion of a vessel, leading to conditions such as anemia and also other conditions where there's a lack of O2 being supplied to respiring cells. The reason sickle cell can lead to anemia, that's probably the most known kind of symptom or cause of it, is because the sickle cells, or any red blood cell in fact, has a very short lifespan. As a result, when they clot and stay in one region, they die, and as a result, the individual has less production of red blood cells and also has a reduced amount in their body, which by definition is what anemia is. Regarding the epidemiology, or in other words, who sickle cell affects the most and why, in America, through the US Genetic Library, they carried stats to show that 1 in 500 African Americans were affected, and I also believe 1 in 1,000 Latino Americans were also affected. So to explain this, I'm going to take you back to GCSE biology and use Punnett squares. Sickle cell is an autosomal recessive genetic condition. For a child to be affected, both parents must transfer their copy of the sickle cell trait, meaning the child has two copies. If it was a dominant condition, the child would only need one for it to be expressed. So basically, using the Punnett square, we can see that a child's chance of having sickle cell, if both parents have it, would be 25%, as there's only one square that contains both copies of the sickle cell trait. However, if we look at the other squares, we can see that there are two squares which contain a single copy of the sickle cell trait, which means that there's a 50% chance of the child being a carrier. Being a carrier means you only carry one copy of the sickle cell trait and therefore will not suffer the consequences or the symptoms aligned with having sickle cell. However, there's still a chance that your family tree can be affected later down the line, such as your children or your children's children, depending on whether it gets selected out or not. In this situation, there is a 50% chance of the child being a carrier, however 0% chance of the child being physically affected by sickle cell. Sickle cell, according to the Mayo Clinic in America, state that you can experience the symptoms of sickle cell from as early as 1 year old, and more specifically around 5 months. The symptoms some individuals affected by sickle cell can kind of experience are pain, tenderness and swelling in the hands and the feet, some vision problems, and occasionally some delayed growth as a result of the lack of oxygen being supplied to some cells in the body. So you might ask me, how do I know whether I have sickle cell or whether my children can potentially have sickle cell? Well, let's firstly start with children. So typically during pregnancy, in England for instance, there is a screening process that occurs at 10 weeks of pregnancy where they can detect whether children potentially might be at risk or have sickle cell. When they have a newborn, there's also a heel prick test. This tests for whether the child carries the sickle cell trait or is affected by it, and also can detect for other conditions which such as cystic fibrosis, which is the overproduction of mucus in the lungs. Now to check whether you specifically potentially have sickle cell or you are a carrier of the trait, the best way to do, well, in England for instance, but I assume other countries also adopt it, as I don't think these are kind of specific through the NHS, visiting a sickle cell and thalassemia center where they will take a blood sample and then test for the genetic traits being present. That is the best way to kind of clear any worries potentially whether you have it or you're a carrier, or whether you simply don't have it at all. For potential treatments, there's only one method that can outright cure sickle cell. This is not typically used as it is a cumbersome process with a lot of high risk. This involves injecting stem cells and doing a bone marrow transplant to kind of replace the production cycle of red blood cells in your body, and therefore kind of making sure that you produce healthy and normal sized red blood cells rather than a sickle shaped. This may only be used as per the NHS under kind of direct guidance where other treatments are unresponsive, and particularly in young candidates. Most treatments or management methods of sickle cell revolve around folic acid supplementation, and what these do is help kind of increase the production of red blood cells in the body to try and combat the sickle cell shaped and natural disadvantage you are at. I will note that this is to kind of manage the anemia aspect, which is the low red blood cell count, and this is very different to iron deficiency anemia, so I wouldn't recommend, and based on the NHS guidance, they also don't recommend taking iron tablets or supplementation. So I would say that you should visit your GP, visit your local A&E or whatever kind of services directed for sickle cell specifically, so they can guide you on how to manage it appropriately and effectively. But I will also mention, in a sickle cell crisis, the number one thing to do is to go to A&E. As per the NHS, there's also another medication called hydroxycarbamide, which lowers your platelet count. Platelets are responsible for clotting, so as we mentioned before, sickle cell patients are typically more susceptible to kind of clotting. So this medication kind of directly goes against that and kind of reduces the chance of it occurring. For all the information, if you want to read more, all the websites I use, I'm going to link in the description so that you can kind of read through them thoroughly. Similarly, if there's any mistakes, please note it in the comments and I'll pin it so that people can see the corrected version of it. As I'm a medical student, I might get things wrong. I'm not saying I'm the be-all end-all of information. Much like everyone else here, I'm reading and trying to understand it thoroughly. Looking at the timer, I can see there is kind of just enough time to say make sure to like the video, share it with your friends and your family who may also be affected by sickle cell or just want to know a little bit more about it, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any videos in the future. Typically I make sports medicine content, if you look through my channel, but I have done a few kind of general health videos which revolve around blood pressure and lower back pain, so definitely check them out if you kind of want to know more information. But apart from that, I'll see you guys next time.